Hello, hello, hello. We've got a fantastic episode for you today. We sat down with Joe Hastings, head of Music Minds Matter, to speak about his journey from film composition to working for the charity Help Musicians and how the scope of this UK charity's work has changed over the years. We discussed the groundbreaking study from 2016 entitled Can Music Make You Sick? As well, of course, as the magic of fizzy iced tea, leg warmers and glitter. If you or someone you know is a musician looking for support with their mental health, then please see our show notes for Music Minds Matters 24/7 helpline. All of our usual socials are linked there too, and we're currently crowdfunding to support costs for the next 6 months of the pod. So you can find information there about that and so much more. Thank you so much to everybody who's already donated. We are beyond grateful. It's been a busy old time for TMDTA. There's been lots of stuff going on. One of the most joyful things that we experienced recently was that Hattie and I headed up to Manchester, in fact, yesterday, from when I'm recording this, to take part in a panel discussion at the wonderful Empower International Women's Day event hosted by Sinead and Hannah. It was just, those events where, you just kind of turn up, you don't know what you're expecting, and then you come away from it just feeling totally inspired and ready to keep on working for, I wanted to say the greater good, but you know what I mean. Just keep on striving for a better world. I always record these spiels being like, I'm going to tell everyone what I've been up to, but I genuinely can't remember, other than the fact that this week I've been up in Derbyshire with my partner and his dad doing some DIY. So if anybody needs a kitchen installing, I've got some of the skills to do that. Apart from that, just been preparing for an audition, feeling quite thinly spread at the moment, definitely struggling with feelings of letting a lot of people down, which I think is quite a common thing as a freelancer. It's like, I don't know, as soon as you get a great gig or something, then you're letting your students down because you have to get DEPs to cover teaching, or you can't find DEPs to cover teaching, or, maybe you're tired from your gig and then you feel like your quality of teaching isn't so good. Or if you're really busy fitting in your teaching, then you're not seeing your friends as much. And just been struggling with feelings of inadequacy a little bit in terms of, spinning all those old plates. Anyway, back to cheerier things. Without further ado, here's things musicians don't talk about.
So hello everyone, we are here today in Help Musicians offices with the wonderful head of Music Minds Matter charity, Joe Hastings. Hello Joe, thank you so much for being here. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. I'm good. We're busy as usual, but it's really nice to get to talk to you.
It's really nice to come and see because Help Musicians and everything feels so
online,
ethereal.
Yeah,
and it's nice that it's a real place as well.
Yeah, it didn't feel like that for obvious reasons during the pandemic, and I think people coming into the space and it being so central in King's Cross is something that was always really nice before the pandemic, and then since we've all returned to the office, it's been really nice and we've sort of rejigged areas of it, so it's much more kind of welcoming to chats and for people coming in. It feels really nice to be back and to be able to welcome people in.
Absolutely. So we really wanted to talk to you today about Music Minds Matter in general and a kind of music and mental health specific charity. First of all, could you just tell us why this charity? Give it what's the reason behind it? Why do we need it?
So Help Musicians, formerly the Musicians Benevolent Fund, has existed for over 100 years. And as a charity, it's always done a lot of the work that continues, albeit in a much more significant and larger fashion now, for people working in music, and particularly for performing musicians and people sort of in the background of events. And when I joined the charity, we were doing that work, and it was But I think it's fair to say it was a relatively the numbers weren't as high as they are. If I'm being kind, the numbers weren't anything like what they are now in terms of how many individuals we're engaging with, and actually the breadth of engagement across the sector, as opposed to probably when I started, 70 or 80% of people we were working with were from the classical music area. So that's been a huge shift over the last 10 years. But the other thing that changed about 6 years ago was we started we wanted to understand what the key issues were for people who were applying for support here. And it might sound like ridiculous now, but we didn't really have those insights because we were dealing with people on a case by case basis. It was all very paper based, so it was quite kind of people's case files sat separately, and we didn't really have that integration. So we started with research. So we did a big piece of wellbeing research in 2015, roughly 2014, 2015, which showed that the primary issues that people were finding challenging in terms of their careers were around hearing health, vocal health, musculoskeletal health, and mental health was by far the largest kind of impact on people's careers. So we undertook research to look specifically at the mental health support needs. And we also did research in all the other areas, and we continue to that were important. But the mental health research was the first piece of key research we did, and that went out to we got about 2,200 responses to that research from across the sector. And it showed really sort of troubling levels of mental health precarity across the piece, so to speak. So 71% of people responded saying that they experienced anxiety regularly and performance-related anxiety, and about 68% of people said that they were regularly experiencing depression or low mood. So it was quite profound, and that's just to put it into perspective, that's roughly 3 times the average in society. So we were looking at much higher levels of those kind of presenting issues in the sector, which obviously then led us to think about what we were going to do in response to the research. It would have been it wouldn't have felt like we were completing the circle if we just did research and said this is a problem, especially because we are an independent charity. We have the ability to shape our support based on the needs of people and based on what people present with, and that led to in late 2015 us developing creating the Music Minds Matter service, and it's run since then. And obviously I'll talk more about how it's changed, but it was set up in response to that big piece of research.
And this was a piece of research separate to the subsequent Can Music Make You Sick thing? That is it? Yeah. Okay, sorry.
I should have said the name of it.
No, it's all good. Don't worry, because that is, I think that whole study has been a big part of our kind of ongoing reading for the year.
Yes, I'm still making my way through it.
It's taken me a while to make my way through it.
Just because there's so much in it.
To highlight and think about, and especially the case studies and what people have said, it kind of brings to life these numbers which can feel quite alien, I guess.
I think the numbers tell a really important part of the story, but getting that kind of the qualitative information, the rich feedback and the personal responses is really important, which is why we often do focus groups as well on the back of research, and we'll actively engage with people to get their kind of more personal responses to pieces of research to understand in more detail what some of those kind of prevailing issues are.
Right, okay. So at the moment you've taken on this role of being head of Music Minds Matter, that's like your title. Can you talk us through your journey through the charity? Like, when did you start at Help Musicians, and what has your role been within the charity?
You're testing me on the date.
We don't need exact dates, don't worry.
So I have a background in music, so I studied music and went on to work in film and TV as a kind of arranger, and I wrote soundtracks, not massively successfully, but I did enough work for it to eke out a living for a reasonable amount of time. But I was always I'd also done work when I was studying music, working in bail hostels and prisons and other kind of therapeutic environments. Well, they're not therapeutic environments, but working in therapeutic capacities in those environments.
You wish they were therapeutic.
Yeah, exactly. And so I, when I left university, I kind of had a career, but I was also paying to kind of continue to develop my understanding of sort of therapeutic support, and then after a point where things got a bit more tricky for me in terms of music work, which was roughly around the time of the financial crash. Right. I started to do, because there was less work and because I was not that successful, I wasn't getting as much work as I had been previously. There wasn't as much being funded. I started to train properly, and I was working in London, and I did a therapy course. Basically, I studied therapy for about 3 years. And in that time as well, I also ran a service in Camden, which was a homeless outreach service for people with mental health issues. So it was people who were in really desperate, really difficult sort of states. So but that was my job, and I was working on the streets around our office actually.
Wow.
So I know that car park next door quite well. We'd often find people were sleeping there, and it was I walked past the building and saw this slightly old-fashioned logo for the Musicians Benevolent Fund, and I was trying to work out exactly what benevolence was in my head. I was like, sort of know what that means, like kind of sort of altruistic support, like charitable support, and then I looked them up, and they had this again very dated website even for then, but it looked like they did really good work, and it was a kind of marrying of two areas of that I was really passionate about, which was music and support and the kind of supporting the needs of people who were vulnerable and who were experiencing hardship. So I phoned them up and I said, do you have any work? And they said, yeah, we've got, actually there's a job. Are you phoning about the caseworker, the senior officer role, the caseworker role? And I said, oh, what does that entail? And I said, well, it's making grants to people who've got health or other issues that are affecting their ability to manage, and making grant decisions, going to see people, assessing, writing reports, and usually saying yes to the support that they need. And I thought, well, that sounds much better than the situation that I was starting to find myself in street outreach, which was often not being able to find the support that people needed. And it was also it also felt like a kind of a progression. I'd been training and learning, and then this was a role that would maybe
tie it all together.
Yeah. And so I did. I went for the interview, got the job, and then obviously when we got a chief exec like James Ainscough, I know you've probably both met. Yeah. That's just the amount that we've moved on from where we were has been has kind of has just shifted really fast to the point where now I'd like to think that most people in this industry at least know who we are as help musicians, and equally as Music Minds Matter now, I think we are beginning to build that kind of that awareness across the industry as well.
Yeah, I definitely think that's true, and it's always you always feel like there's not enough support given the scale of everything, but it feels like you're right that progression from where it was to where it is now has been just ultra fast to try and catch up to where it needs to be, and I think that's completely commendable. So talking about this research that happened for the launch research, can you talk a little bit more about what the research kind of showed and what the main needs were for the people?
The research, the Music Make research showed that precarity of employment was a massive contributor to people's ability to manage their mental health, but actually it's not. It's so 72% roughly of people across the industry are freelance, which is massive compared to other employment sectors. Yeah. But 85% of people working in classical music are self-employed and freelance. And so I hadn't really taken that on board until it was published in research that Jane Ginsburg and Susanna Cohen, Dr. Susanna Cohen, we were kind of involved in some small way with that research. But it really brought home to me that some of my presumptions were wrong about classical music.
You know, you're saying that your partner, he's been graduated, how long now?
For almost 4 years.
And it's like the first position that's come up in the UK for a tuba player.
In like 10 years.
Yeah.
And it's really striking that you're right, that it's a huge percentage of people being freelance, and it's...
And I don't think that's something that college made us massively aware of in a funny way.
I don't know, I don't think I was ever told that I would be employed, but there was always...
quite murky.
Yeah, there was always this narrative of trying to get a job, but then never the kind of, but it will still be precarious after that.
I mean, the other thing I say is that it's not all bad news, that, because there is a lot of, there are a lot of people who enter the music industry because of the nature of freelance work, because they move from job to job, or because they move from venue to venue, or and there's nothing wrong with that. So I wouldn't want to completely conflate those two issues, as in, if you're self-employed,
you're stressed.
Yeah, precarity of employment is an issue for you, because there are loads of self-employed people who work in music who have really stable, employment. I suspect less so since the pandemic, for obvious reasons. But it's not a given that because you're self-employed, your career is harder than it would be if you were working under contract. And there are lots of things working under contract that can be challenging as well.
But in terms of support, I guess you are limited in more ways. I mean, I don't know how much you've seen of the ISM's dignity of work thing, and that was quite interesting about, the law, the employment law, and how musicians don't know, by being self-employed, what rights they have and what being a worker means, and all of this can have added stress because you just don't really know where you fit, so you kind of tend then to put yourself on the back foot and just assume you shouldn't make a fuss or whatever. So all these kind of things have impact, don't they?
So this came through the research, the Can Music Make You Sick research, but it's come through subsequent research quite profoundly, and through the casework team in health and welfare, who go out and visit thousands of musicians, or did, and have been doing phone calls in lockdown and are now going out to visit again, is the level of social isolation in the industry. And it again, it's like another thing. It's like, it's so obvious that would be commonplace, particularly in younger musicians and people across the industry. And that that's also reflective of when we set up the support groups. That's really reflected in the popularity for support groups, for sessions, the kind of group collective activity and engagement. And I think that tells quite a sort of troubling sort of story as well, which is that often people don't know where to reach out about the things they're experiencing. So if you're having a hard time, you may have a supportive friend, but if you don't, then you don't have necessarily what we have here, which is an office full of very empathetic people who you could talk to if you felt comfortable doing that. And I think that's really common. So for composers sitting in a studio for 12 hours a day, 14 hours a day, to musicians touring with a group of 4 people that they love to hate, or in an orchestral environment sometimes as well, where there's potentially 90 odd people in a space, but not necessarily the people that you might feel comfortable talking to about what you experience.
Or if you do feel comfortable to them, it doesn't always feel like the time and place if you're in a rehearsal, or it's like a tea break and you want to keep things light or whatever. And it's I found that the other week, where I'd been like, I feel like I've seen loads of people but I still feel really lonely, and it was because I'd been to lots of rehearsals but I hadn't spent quality time with anybody. I'd just been working. It's not the same thing.
From the research, I remember reading it when it came out 2018. Can Music Make You Sick?
No,
2017?
2016.
Oh my gosh, okay. Well, maybe it was a bit after it came out.
We all lost a couple of years.
But that was, my kind of peak shit time in college. And I remember reading that statistic of 7... Now, you're going to have to get your numbers out, Joe. But the percentage of musicians who have experienced mental illness, basically, or depression.
So 71% anxiety, 69% depression.
Yeah, I remember reading that, and I remember looking around my orchestra, feeling awful, and being kind of angry at those numbers, because I was just thinking, yes, that might be true, but I don't know one of these people in here have suffered at all. So I'm just really curious about. Obviously, that was back in 2017 and 18 when I read that and felt that isolation and anger. And since then, I know the conversation has thankfully grown, and through lockdown and everything, people are more vulnerable and we aren't noticing that. But how are you hoping that Music Minds Matter, this new subsidiary arm of Help Musicians, can open up that conversation and encourage musicians to support each other, or be honest about where they've been?
Well, I mean, I'd argue that, and it's not just Music Minds Matter, but I'd argue that that's already been happening. I think, from the research, I'm not suggesting that we need to have an argument. I'd suggest that that's
argue with us, please.
because and what I was really keen to ensure we did when the research was published was that we build something that helps, that gives people that really important piece of help that they need in that moment, but that also we try and learn, because it felt to me like the start of something. It's complete, we've done this research, here's the service, this will solve all the problems, and also that we made sure that we were working in partnership with other organisations, like Music Support and Tonic Rider and BAPAM and the Royal Society of Musicians and PRS, Members Fund, and many other organisations that we work with a lot and commonly, and we work really well with, to continue to learn and build insights, and that's been a key part of understanding and shaping the service. But it's also enabled us to say that we are building and developing services based on the insights that musicians and people in the sector are giving us, and therefore I think we get really positive feedback because the services reflect what people need, not necessarily what people tell us they need, but what people actually need, because we have that level of engagement with people now. So it's not an ideal place we're in now, but I think we're a long way from where we were before that research was published. Those conversations are now at a point where collaboration, connectivity, moving on from conversations into action are happening, and that's really positive, and it's more than I expected, I have to say, when we first launched with Music Minds Matter.
No, I think that's the great thing. There's always signposting on the site, and in general in the work you do, and in the event that we attended on World Mental Health Day, that was very much a celebration of partners and the work people are doing, not just like, look how great our work is. I've always had that vibe from you guys. I just have a question about whether you have an insight through your whole time here and everything of maybe why, in terms of stigma, there's still this kind of issue of musicians talking to each other. Like, they might now have confidence to talk to Help Musicians, BAPAM, or whatever, but I still sense a bit of a, what's the word? Resistance to speaking to each other and being open about having a harder time. Do you have an idea of how maybe that Music Minds Matter could help that change, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think the peer support groups in particular, which we run in collaboration with Tonic Rider, they're telling a story, which is that people, we set they're run over 6 weeks. The sessions, they are run and sort of led by a BACP accredited, so a fully accredited therapist, and the therapist is not there to impart wisdom. They're there to be part of encouraging the safe conversation to happen, and people can talk about whatever they're finding difficult, and what they see in these small groups, of 12 people over 6 sessions, is the building of this kind of peer network, and that approach has been well researched, and it's actually really impactful. but I don't think there's enough of it happening, I'd say, in society actually. But the one of the big insights from the peer support groups is that people don't want it to stop at 6 sessions. So they want to, not everyone, but most people want to continue that contact. They see the value in these new friendships that they've built, these new sort of safe, healthy friendships that they've built. So I want us to do more about that, and I think the potential for that, if you think about the kind of the number of people you can interact with and engage with through that, and the number of people who are benefiting from having a support network, and is significant, and it's something that, knowing how much social isolation there is in this industry, is definitely needed.
You could say that though that is still very much, although people know it exists and it's there for them, is that a way of destigmatizing the issue, like industry wide?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of part. It is one of the potential areas of development for us is looking at that more broadly.
Okay.
And actually, so I don't want you to think that what I'm saying is that the peer support groups are going to be extended, so that they continue to be this sort of this fairly finite resource and support structure for people actually learning from those insights and thinking as an organisation that has a lot of insight, thinking and has the ability to actually develop services on the basis of insights. What can we do to kind of promote those kind of communities? And I think that's something that is really interesting and potentially quite exciting for us and for others in the industry as well. It's not just us who are recognising the potential benefit in that.
I suppose also being kind of supported and empowered in these groups makes those people within the groups more comfortable about talking about these things amongst other peers, not just in those groups. And I think it's really great that there's a therapist there to kind of lead them in that conversation and kind of perhaps provide them with language or the right questions or something. I was actually going to ask about the therapist and also on the helpline. In general, the people that the therapists and whoever's helping out with the mental health support, are they musically trained or are they musically informed?
Yeah, so I should have started with that, shouldn't I?
No, I was just wondering because from a personal point, I'm training as a counsellor at the moment, and I'd love to work in music, but the first thing that comes to my mind is that music is such a small world. How on earth could you work within confidentiality if you know everybody? And
yeah, I mean, that's not come up as an issue actually. So in the service, so what the service as it functioned for 3 years initially was a kind of a partnership with an organisation who delivered similar services, and the service was you would call and speak to a helpline trained advisor, and then you may be able to access some therapy based on an assessment through their network of therapists, so the partners therapists. And one of the big things that changed when we were reviewing the service in 2020 which was the end of that kind of 3-year period, was to look at what people were benefiting from through the service, but also to do research and ask people what they wanted, and ask people who'd used the service, but also ask people who weren't using the service what they would like from a service. And there were 2 key findings from that. One was they wanted to talk to a therapist immediately. They didn't want to talk to helpline advisors. There's nothing wrong with people being helpline advisors, but they didn't want that. They wanted to talk to therapists. So they wanted that conversation to be with someone who was appropriately accredited and trained to deliver a therapeutic conversation. So we call it, it's kind of a listening ear service. But and actually, the majority of people who use Music Minds Matter use that service as a standalone, and it's sufficient for them to go away and sort of take into practice whatever they've discussed with the therapist in the call. So that was one key point, and then the other key development was that people wanted access to therapy with therapists who had a very good understanding of the industry. So at first, I kind of was a little uncomfortable with that because I still believe a good therapist is a good therapist, and it's probably more important the mode of therapy that you're accessing based on your presenting issues. Sorry, I'm going to technical stuff here, but but that being such an overwhelming need and such an overwhelming response from people, it overrode my kind of, well, no, good therapist is a good therapist. And actually now I see how much of an impact and how much of a change that was, and how much of a positive change it was.
I think that's one of the things that I found so frustrating in the past. No matter how good a therapist they were, there were certain things that I just felt like I couldn't get my point across about how precarious the work was, or like they couldn't quite understand why I still wanted to be a musician. I feel like I've been blaring on about CBT a lot recently, but a lot of my kind of issues with the CBT that I've received has always been like, it's come down to, okay, well, why are you stressed? It's because of music. And they're like, well, then maybe you could leave the music. And it's like, no, that's not the that's not the answer.
Yeah, that was I remember that being a quote in a focus group was from someone saying, I had therapy. I spoke to a therapist. I told them that the irregular hours were making it hard for me to sleep, and it was affecting my mental health. And they said, "Well, stop working at 10 at night or whatever." And it was like, okay, that's my job. Like, okay, so
it's the same with the musculoskeletal stuff.
Yeah, with the GP being like, if you got pain in your rest, just stop playing.
Yeah.
So it's an invaluable resource to have people like that, Pam, and specifically trained therapists.
Yeah,
for sure.
Within your new role, and obviously having both the music background and the counselling, mental health kind of background, how do you feel it's been like running this whole thing? Seeing an overview of it all. How has the experience been so far from your kind of personal perspective?
Amazing. You know, having a board of such experienced professionals from across the industry with a real passion and understanding of mental health is completely it's early days, but it already feels very different because I have this collective of people with an incredible. I'm going to avoid saying hive mind, but this incredible kind of knowledge that can help shape the service, and we're set to spend well over £1 million next year within the service, and that is incredible, and it's testament to the wider charity, and it's acknowledgement of the importance of this area that we are committing that, but also that we're kind of growing the service. But it's also reflective of need, because last year we saw an 118% increase of people using the service, and this year we've seen somewhere around 34 to 35% increase. So those numbers have gone up significantly.
My kind of final question was going to be about it feels like it's getting harder and harder to be a musician in this day and age, and it's amazing to hear about how much support there is for musicians, but what are your thoughts around what it is to be a musician and where that's going?
I mean, yes, I agree with everything you're saying, but I also think that there are lots of good examples of people who have very healthy careers and are doing very well, and and across the industry that's the case. I don't think everything is bad. We are also in a really, I mean, I don't know how many times over the last few years people have used the word unprecedented, but we're in a different unprecedented time of need, and the research that we did recently told us that 88% of people were struggling to manage on their income, and that's a really shocking situation that people are in. So and how much of that is going to be the same in 2 or 3 years, I think is the tricky part to answer. But where we are right now, and where we are as a charity right now, is responding to the need, but also trying to kind of get some answers that will help us to shape the services in 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, that's hopeful. It's good. It is good because you kind of, from my perspective, it's very easy for me to get caught up in like the next 6 months of like finance or whatever, but actually you're right, like looking to 2 or 3 years down the line, it has to get better. There are people that are making it work, and we can learn from them.
We normally end these conversations with like a little win of the week, or like a little positive thing from your week that you want to share.
For the first time ever, I already have mine.
So I think you should go first.
My win of the week is that I've been climbing twice and I've stayed relatively on top of my emails.
I think you're going to say I've stayed sober.
No, I haven't stayed sober. How dare you?
You have been very good on the emails.
Yes, thank you.
It's unprecedented.
It is unprecedented.
These are unprecedented times.
They are unprecedented
Yeah, in
times.
positive ways as well as negative.
Do you have an idea of a positive?
My win of the week. So yes, something positive that I.
However small or big. We've had some really big ones recently.
Oh, that puts pressure on for me to think of something really big.
Well, mine was that I replied to some emails, so I think you'll be fine.
My win of the week is actually a little bit of a cheat because it was last week.
That's
but
fine.
My dad's been unwell, and we bought him for his birthday this carpentry course because my granddad was a cabinet maker.
Aww.
So I did it because he couldn't do it.
No.
And I built I learned how to do dovetail joints, and actually, you know what? It reminded me of what it's like to be really focused on a piece of music and really focused on creating a piece of music or performing, which is just that the sort of attention to detail, but also being completely in something, and there's something in the brain going on there. I mean, it's a long time since I read that Oliver Sacks book, but the brain is working differently when you're in that kind of mode, and it was very similar. And and just the feeling after 3 days of and having something that I'd made and looking at it and going, it's really not bad. was incredibly.
What was it that you made?
Well,
It was a violin.
No, it's a recipe stand. It's like light oak, and it's very pretty. It looks nice. It looks like something you'd find in a sort of a sort of turn of the century church or something.
Ooh,
but it's very
lovely.
nice. Yeah.
Are you going to keep
Curved
it
edges.
or gift it to someone?
Well, I think I'm going to be selfish and keep it because I'm proud of it.
Your dad wasn't like, whatever you make is mine.
Well, I did think would it be nice to gift it to him, but then maybe I will. I'll
Maybe it
see.
could be a joint
I'll see how I
thing.
feel.
You could be like, we're both going to use it, but it's going to be at my house.
And then my other small win of the week was that we managed to. I'm a class rep for my son's class, and we managed to find. They're doing Fame as the Christmas.
Of course.
Christmas musical.
The classic
Fame.
Christmas.
They're doing Fame, and we managed to source all of the 80s, whatever, the gear, what do you call them? The
Leg warmers.
Leg warmers and glitter, and we managed
That's
to source
a
it all
lot.
for very little money, so it's not cost.
Again,
us
big wins of the week.
Is this a secondary school doing thing?
No.
You're joking me?
No, he's 6. It's yeah.
He's 6.
Yeah.
They're not doing the whole musical.
Fame.
Well, he's doing a track. He's got the moves down though. He showed me last night in the lounge.
Is he a dancer and then backup dancer, or is he part of the main plot?
But that I don't know yet actually, because you don't get much out of kids at that age. But he is on stage and he's going to be moving.
That's so sweet.
That's a lot.
They don't do the nativity anymore.
That is the nativity now.
Well, yeah. I think that's true.
It's the new nativity. Oh, brilliant.
And Hattie.
Oh, I knew it was coming down to me.
Well, everybody has to do one, so of course it was. You can do it.
Yeah, I guess it's a win. I went abroad for the first time since COVID, and it was quite stressful. I went to Amsterdam over the weekend.
As you do.
As you do. And it was, I had some old emotions come up, that feeling of being in a new country and like being a little bit homesick and like, whoa, it's quite a horrible emotion.
It's not nice.
So I had that come up.
And that's your win.
No,
the win was that
as I came back and I had a great time. I got through those moments, the difficult moments. I
the
accepted
win was
them
that you
for
came back to the UK.
My win was that I arrived back.
You
One
guys.
thing they have in Europe that is like, I wish they had here, is the Lipton iced tea but sparkling. Can't get that here.
No, it's true, you can't.
And that is so good.
I've never had that.
We only have the still
Yeah.
one, the sparkling one. Anyway.
Very good. All right, well, thank you so much, Joe.
Thank you.
It's
Thank you
honestly
very much.
been so lovely talking
We
to you.
can't
Yeah,
wait to see
likewise.
what's going to happen with the next year of this new charity
and beyond.
And beyond.
Look to the future, Hattie.
Always. Thank you so much.